our continuing series here of INTERPHEX Live, the virtual version. As I have indicated on a couple of the previous recordings and webcasts, is that we would currently be doing this at the Crystal Palace at the Javits Center in New York City. Unfortunately, not this year. Next year, fingers crossed, as I say, we will be back. But fortunately, because we have the cooperation of many of our colleagues and sponsors throughout the industry, we were able to put these things together and by the efforts of Reed Exhibit. In particular, today we're going to be talking about the CMO and sponsor relationship, and we have with us today is Bikash Chatterjee from he's the Chief Operating and Science Officer at Pharmatech, and Ed Price, he is President and CEO of SEQENS, and he'll be joining us today as well. All right, so what we're going to do first is we'll kind of weed through this, and I had asked Bikash to, we're going to try to get some of this alphabet soup out there and sort it out. We have this, CDMO, CRO, CDRO, that kind of stuff. So maybe we could just, so that we could focus our conversation today specifically. Okay? So Ed, Bikash, why don't we pick up on that, where we were with the, what are all abbreviations?
Yeah, you got it. Yeah, you're right. I joke that our industry loves abbreviations. If we can get a sentence in without a linking verb, people think that's quite an achievement. When we talk about a CMO, we're talking about a contract manufacturing organization, an outside contract service provider that's going to be engaged to manufacture a product for the market, some phase of the product for the market. Out there, CDMO, the D denotes development. And so these are contract manufacturers that have a strong technical component in their service offering out there, and they often get involved early to mid-stage clinical trial material development or stability development, fundamentally supporting CMC and scale up and scale out. And then you've got the CROs, which are contract research organizations. These can be involved as early as formulation and product design, which you often see, and can also go all the way down through the development life cycle to handle clinical trial materials in there. All three play very, very critical roles in today's market, the global market, quite honestly, in making sure that we can develop and get drugs on the market that are safe and efficacious.
So if I had a new chemical entity, let's just say it was a small molecule, and I was either a sponsor or perhaps, a venture capital outfit or somebody else, which one would I go to? CRO, CDMO, or what?
Well, I would say you would look at a CDMO usually. Virtual biotech is probably one of the fastest growing, well, until COVID, it was certainly the fastest growing sectors in the US in terms of our industry. We're lucky in California, we have the largest concentration of venture capitalists in the world up on Sand Hill Road here. And there's quite a few small biotech companies, and these are companies that are perhaps university spin-offs or postdoctoral spin-offs, and they have strong internal expertise as it relates to innovation, not so much infrastructure expertise as it relates to execution. And so as you start to look at taking these early stage products from innovation into, say, animal studies, and then from there into human beings, they look to engage a contract manufacturer that's got the capabilities and the expertise to provide some of that guidances and services. It's a cost-effective way to go. You're basically buying their expertise and experience in doing drug development, and you have a little bit of a hedge in that early stage, phase 1, phase 2A sort of clinical studies. The GMP component does not need to be as rigorous, but phase appropriate GMPs as it were. But the technical component does have to be usually more emphasized in those situations. So you see quite a few CDMOs being engaged as strategic partners, perhaps initially tactical, but ultimately evolving to strategic partners in drug development today.
So Ed, why don't you jump in here? I mean, so having come from a large industry myself, and now act as having my own consulting business, what I find is a lot of times, I find people, they have a bag of NCE, they want to get this to market.
Sure.
They always So I'm asking you, same question. So where would I go?
I think just like Bikash, we being located in Boston, maybe we may not be the epicenter of venture capital, but we're certainly one of the epicenters of the biotech industry here. So, you know, we happen to have two businesses. We have our commercial business, and then we have our development business. And our development business is really the fastest growing and really most profitable part of our business. We've worked really hard over the last 10 years to develop our organization to be, in fact, a CDMO. We're a contract development manufacturing organization. So most people who come to us, or I should say really all people who come to us, are leveraging every aspect of our organization. So as a fully integrated CDMO, that means people are coming to me for chemistry expertise, specifically problem solving, scaling up, developing the synthetic route for the actual NCE, analytical development. Most of the people that we work with spend almost as much with us on analytical development as they do on process development. The tremendous amount of characterization and analytical work has to be done to be able to release the material for the clinic. And then, of course, there's the whole aspect of scaling up and producing under GMP, whether that's early phase clinical material or actually kilograms for later stage trials. So, you know, we consider ourselves a CDMO, and quite frankly, when people come to us with a new project, if they're not touching all the different parts of our integrated offering, it's usually not a good fit for us, actually. And we would suggest that they move on and go talk to some other manufacturers, because the truth is, you know, there's a lot of smaller shops around that have very specific expertise that might be more cost effective than we do. But as an integrated manufacturer like we do, the efficiency that we get to offer our customers, plus the technical expertise in so many different areas, allows them to accelerate their development and ultimately save them time and money, even though for any specific aspect of what we do might cost a little bit more than if they went to a CRO that just specialized in that one particular area.
Let me ask you this, Bikash. Thanks, Ed. So I think, how far back, in other words, if I don't have adequate NCE, or let's just stick with the small molecule, are most CDMOs or CMOs capable of getting onto the synthetic side as well to make the compound?
There are definitely some that have API capability, analytical method capability, as well as the drug substance, drug product manufacturing components as you move through that. That's not typical. A lot of times API sourcing is in and of itself its own piece of the supply chain. A lot has been said during the COVID trials that we've been navigating here, that, you know, our dependency on API for critical life-sustaining drugs and drugs that are on the drug shortage list largely comes from overseas, and that is a challenge. If you're a virtual company and you're looking to start building your supply chain, if you find a full-service CDMO like Ed's company here, oftentimes they have the expertise and infrastructure to take on some of that procurement and evaluation responsibilities, which can help tremendously for a small company that's trying to navigate the early demonstration phases of their product.
Okay, and you had mentioned something that I found very interesting, and sometimes it's the match. You know, so let me ask you this: as you know, what are as a CMO, what are the things that a sponsor should know, or you want them to know before you even start talking, so we don't get into this, geez, it's a mismatch kind of thing?
Sure. Well, you know, that's actually something I've written, you know, quite extensively about. You know, I think there's a number of areas where fit is imperative to really assume a successful collaboration. And I can only really speak from my own experience. I don't know necessarily how other companies work in terms of engagement with their sponsors. But, you know, the things that are really important to us is we want close collaboration. The projects that we get involved with are very technically complex, multiple steps of chemistry, raw materials that have to be sourced from all over the world. We have to develop analytical procedures for in-process testing, raw materials, finished products. It's tremendous volume of technical that has to be done in all aspects of API manufacturing. And the fact of the matter is, we're doing something that's never been done before. The technical challenges are completely unforeseen. Nobody knows what's going to happen until you get into it. And we have no idea what problems are going to need to be solved. And also, frankly, it's impossible to even predict what the total investment is going to be to actually do it. So I would say that the first thing that we make sure is that we leverage our reputation as well as all the companies that we've helped be successful. So people come to us, they trust us, and they trust that we're going to be a partner with them. But we're going to expect some very close collaboration, fast decision making. So we're evaluating them as much as they're evaluating us. To be frankly. We have 20 to 24 projects going on simultaneously. So that means 20 to 24 different business models. Every one of our customers has a different business model, has a different funding structure. So we have found over the years that, quite frankly, the very large companies are not a fit for us. The big multinationals who are just trying to focus on one specific part of the program, maybe chemistry or analytical or manufacturing. We have found that working with companies who are using outside part-time consultants doesn't work very well either, because there simply is not enough engagement, with us. We've also found that the small virtual companies, which are 2 to 3 guys who meet at Starbucks every once in a while and outsource everything and are looking really to just get some data and flip the molecule, is not a good fit for us, because we've just found that over the years, the best fit for us is someone who appreciates what we do, wants to collaborate with us closely, but also more importantly is committed to investing in their program for the long term. And we've just found that that's just been enormously successful, and it's allowed our company to grow tremendously over the last 5-6 years.
So Bikash, obviously Ed brings up a lot of excellent points, most of which I've fell over myself at one point or another.
Yeah.
But in other words, if you were going to go to a sponsor CEO, what are some of the best practices that would improve this? Sounds to me like there should be a lot of triage before you guys get down and dirty. So,
well, yeah, and I think so. Our company, Pharmatech Associates, we are a consultancy, but we're a unique consultancy. We are end to end, so we work with companies that are at the discovery phase, the molecule identification phase, or early product ideation phase, all the way to post-commercial pharmacovigilance and registry management. So, truly end to end in terms of that. So, we are often part of the drug sponsor's development team, or in some cases, we're providing services through the CMO to a drug sponsor as it relates to drug development. And so we work with large and small CDMOs, large ones or mid-sized ones like Ed's all the time, and some of the really, really big full service, quote unquote, full service CDMOs out there. And what we found is that everyone talks about this philosophy of collaboration. That's spot on. It needs to be that way. The challenge you'll often have, and we do work worldwide, so we do a lot of work in Asia, we do a lot of work in the emerging markets as well. The sophistication and knowledge base of the drug sponsor is a big component of how effective you're going to be able to integrate with your contract service provider, in this case your CDMO, to make sure that expectations are being managed equitably on both sides of the coin. And that's a really key component to have, recognizing that the CDMO has a very different business model than a drug sponsor does. As Ed says, he's got 24 projects that are running at the same time. When we work with these large ones like Thermo Fisher, they have 400 projects running at the same time. I'm not exaggerating at that point. So they allocate maybe 5 to 6 hours a week for your project. And if you're a small little company and you're attempting to build your phase 1 clinicals or something along those lines, first in human out there, the CDMO is trying to evaluate whether this can be a successful relationship on both sides of the coin. So several things have really helped, we found, in those engagements. One, understanding the program's potential, the indication you're going after, because there is a human component to these products. The last decade, we've seen an tremendous escalation in orphan drug, fast track, breakthrough drug, advanced drug therapies. And some of these things are low volume, high value, necessary drugs for the marketplace out there. And so a CDMO with a high skill set like Ed's might be one that says, you know what, this is right in our sweet spot. We know we can help bring this product to the marketplace, and that's attractive to them. Others may say, you know what, we have 3% capacity available in that particular sector of our overall business there, and this is going to be more headache than it's worth. So having that conversation up front to understand what this program is going to look like is really important. Secondly, it's a big mistake that a lot of drug sponsors make is attempting to enforce their culture, their current systems upon the CDMO. And I tell you, that is a recipe for disaster. It's really important that when you are looking at a CDMO partner to help you bring your product to either the market or through the development pipeline, that you are evaluating their current processes and see how they line up with yours. Because I guarantee 100% as you move into your relationship, those elements of the quality management system, just simplistically there, deviation, change control, CAPA, if you haven't architected and discussed how you're going to interface with each other, it's going to be a source point in every step of the process in your engagement, which isn't going to breed collaboration. So that's something you like to have early on. You may be only in a development agreement. There may not be a quality agreement in place there. There may not be a supply agreement in place there. Likely there isn't. But understanding how you're going to work together in managing these particular elements is very, very important to make sure that we don't disappoint each other in terms of expectations on that. So that's one key thing. The other thing is that I found to be very successful is to be open and honest around the fact that both parties need to be successful, and the CDMO's job is to make money, right? They've got to make money. And so in some of our engagements with them, we've done open book. We sit down and we talk about the cost support, whether it's a capital investment, whether it's a labor component, whether it's having dedicated resources, because our ability to actually forecast demand is not so good as a drug sponsor sometimes, and understanding what that profitability needs to look like. And then also architecting conversations around how we can share improvements is a really important thing to get on the table early on. If you're able to engage a CDMO in that conversation as a drug sponsor, or you find a drug sponsor that understands that conversation early on, you have a solid foundation for building a strong partnership and relationship going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up the supply agreement, quality agreement. Again, having worked, again, I spent 30 years of my career working with large pharma, and our quality group, obviously in a large pharma group, there's two quality groups. There's the development group, and then there's the operational group, the guys who do the commercial side. And quite honestly, what I've always found was that the way with our quality agreement, supply agreement was, you could sum it up, and what that summation was, it's our way or the highway, if you know.
Right. Right.
So the fact that you bring that up, let me ask the question of Ed. So have you seen the sponsor CMO, CDMO evolve? Sounds to me like we may be still stuck in the past here a little bit.
No, well, I kind of revert back to my previous comment in that every company that we work with is different, right? There's just, they're funded differently, their projects are different, the people are different. And this is one of the reasons why we spend so much time making sure that the sponsor is a good fit for us, as well as as we are for the sponsor. Another good point that was just brought up is that we are in fact a business, and in order to be successful, and to me, success means that we can retain our people, we can invest in our facilities, we can maintain our quality systems at a high level, and quite frankly, you need to be profitable to be able to do that. I have very, very low turnover in my technical group, for example. I mean, we don't lose people. And why is that important? That's important because our customers are investing millions of dollars in the development of their molecule. And if somebody were to move on in the middle of the project, all that knowledge leaves with them, and it hurts everybody. And so we got to take care of our people so that we can make sure that things like that don't happen, so that we ultimately can be successful. But the key is trust. After used car salesmen, I think CDMOs and CMOs probably have the worst reputation you know, and trust is just so important. And it's one of the reasons why 5-6 years ago, we changed our business model completely to go to a time and material model, almost like a law firm or an accounting firm. We come up with estimates up front of what we think the project's going to cost. Our rates are transparent, and this is one of the reasons why we want collaboration to be very closely held with us, because if there is a technical problem and our partners need to make an additional investment, they understand why. Okay, and that there's a good reason, and more importantly, they can make a conscious decision whether they want to do it or not, or postpone it to later. Okay, and we're not just trying to run up the bill or charge hours to them. We're very busy, and in order to be successful, you have to be efficient. So we can't have management and our people bogged down with one particular client over billing and technical issues and so forth. And we have very little of that, actually. Ever since we went to the more transparent pricing model and made sure that the people that we work with are collaborating very closely with us. The issues still pop up, of course, considering the number of projects that we actually do. But in the main, our business actually runs much smoother. We're more successful, and we deliver better to our customers, because I think we do have a very high level of trust. It's essential that they listen to us. The fact of the matter is, you could be a small virtual pharmaceutical company. You can hire a consultant. And be honestly, we do more projects in 1 year than that person probably has done in an entire career, actually. Okay, I've seen that over and over and over again. But everyone has to be respectful of their backgrounds and what, in fact, their experiences are in the industry. But if you're a virtual pharmaceutical company, you really want to view us as an extension of their own organization, as their own development arm, if you will. And if you can't trust us to have the technical expertise you need to allow you to be successful, then quite frankly, you've got a big problem. So I kind of beat the trust mantra because it has so many aspects to it. It's not just technical, it's also business, and it also allows both sides to be successful.
Let me ask this question then. Again, having over 40 years experience in the development area myself, you see the trend shifting. In other words, even here at the INTERPHEX live discussions, we've talked about IP, we've talked about CMOs, but I think CMOs, CDMOs, they've become a major component of the industry. So what trend has driven us in that direction? Gosh, what would be your take on that? I mean, all of a sudden, you guys are major players, everybody. Yeah. So how did we get here?
Well, there's been a number of factors over the last 20 years, quite honestly, that's driven the growth of the CDMO market. I think it's targeted $160 billion worldwide by 2025. It's a very, very fastly growing sector. The biggest changes early on, obviously, is capital investment got prohibitive for companies to be vertically integrated for a long, long time. The economy was stalled. Venture money was prohibitive. People wanted quick hits. And so there really wasn't a solution for folks to do it themselves, to keep it inside their four walls. So they had to look outside to find a contract manufacturer that could potentially take on some of that responsibility. And what's happened in the last 20 years is that the role and sophistication of these CMOs and CDMOs has gone up exponentially. Partially, what's also happened there has been the complexity of the products that we're manufacturing today. So we used to talk about API, small molecule, and large molecule. Now we've added complex large molecule to that equation in there. And when we've got cell and gene therapy products, which have very, very different models in terms of how you scale up or scale out, in this case, as you move towards commercial. The characterization and control requirements are considerably more complex, as are the analytical pieces to it. Ed touched on a small piece, which is the analytical part, but I tell you what, that is one of the linchpin components when you are a drug sponsor looking to engage a CDMO. I personally find that to be a consistent area that requires a lot of attention. You're juggling a lot of different assays. It's a high volume lab. And if something goes awry because it's perhaps a touchy assay or a complex assay or an innovative assay out there, you're likely going to have investigations, LIRs and OOSs that need to be managed. And if you don't have a good relationship with that CDMO, you're going to have a heck of a time trying to figure out what's going on. One of the things that drives me crazy is when we're in the middle of a clinical build, or we're doing a process validation, stage 1 process validation, and we have some unusual data. And the answer I get is that, well, we'll release the data to you in 8 weeks after our quality group reviews it and says it's suitable. And I said, okay, but the problem is now. We need to look at this data now so that we can figure out whether we need to rebuild a lot or if it was just an assay issue in that. And so if you haven't articulated those pieces to the CDMO up front, you're going to be surprised. The other thing is we work with a lot of development CDMOs out there, and they will lay out their policies because they have multiple clients in there at any one time. Confidentiality is paramount as to what they're doing. So if you want a person in the plant to watch your build, some of them will tell us, well, you can come, but we've got a room for you with a camera where you can watch what's happening on the floor. Well, the first time that happened to me, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. I need to be there with your operators. But the reality is 9 times out of 10, having a scientist standing next to their operators is the worst thing you can possibly do, because you're quite frankly just going to screw it up. And you're going to get in their way. You're going to give them instructions that are not part of their training, not part of the process. And so all of these little things out there have sort of evolved in the CDMO's role in the overall drug development piece. And to the point where now quite a few large biotech and large pharma, for example, will approach a CDMO or a contract service provider, perhaps for analytical testing, for example, on an FTE basis. It says, you know what, I'm going to pay for 4 FTEs to basically be in your lab to do our product testing, our product characterization in there. It's no longer time and materials. It's, I'm paying for 4 headcount. So they're basically an extension of their overall development and manufacturing framework.
Let me ask this then. I mean, it sounds to me, the rules of the game have to be laid out pretty specifically. And I think one of the things that we learned the hard way was the supplier agreement. So let me just, I think you kind of led up to that with the FTE stuff. Let me just ask you a quick, that question. So I would think time spent with a supplier agreement could lay out a lot of this, so you don't have the guy hanging over the fellow in the process area or some other idiotic stuff with 8 weeks and I'll have the stuff for you to review. That's unacceptable. So how do you do that? How do you put all of this into an agreement?
I could jump in. I can jump in first, and then Ed, you can give me your perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So as we look at, as Ed said, if you're doing development, that's a development agreement. You don't have a supply agreement in place there. A supply agreement typically is something that you are looking at in late phase 2B as you move into phase 3 for commercial, right? And I joke that, the one thing we know for sure is that the forecast I'm going to tell you is wrong. We just don't know by how much. And so we'll start with that premise, and we'll discuss a framework there. But a supply agreement is a really, really important milestone in the overall drug development relationship, because we're moving the CDMO from practically a tactical partner. Even though the intent in selecting them is to be strategic, their participation has been tactical. They have services they're providing to you that you're counting on them to do. But the reality is you've selected them, having gone through your evaluation criteria, to be your strategic partner. And so as you move into the supply agreement conversation, where you talk about security of supply, about forecasting, about additional services such as supply chain management and procurement, if you've got a complicated supply chain, for example, out there, it's very important that you're able to establish the specifics around roles and responsibilities for that in an open and mutually beneficial manner. So that win-win philosophy for a drug sponsor is very important to have in mind, because it is a very different model for the contract service provider. I'll give you one simple example. We were doing a late-stage clinical study with a very large CDMO out there, and 2011 process validation guidance came out, and as you know, the 2011 process validation guidance completely changed the game in terms of the definition of process validation. It was no longer a destination exercise in the development life cycle. It was now a life cycle with 3 stages. Now they're making commercial products for 300 different companies around the world. And so when we came in to redefine the SOPs around the process validation guidance, they would not do it. They said we can't jeopardize the current commercial products, which are grandfathered under the old rule, with these new ones. They're handled as a, under the CPV component of that. But we found a solution around that. Having a clear understanding that they do have a business to run in the structure of your supply agreement is a really important attitude to have when you go in there. As you said, my way or the highway doesn't really work anymore because both sides have got to know that they're going to get something out of it. The other thing that if you haven't already dealt with this in the development agreement is to deal with intellectual property, because as you're looking at innovating and developing these processes, CDMO is bringing their expertise to the table as well in terms of how best to do it as you're scaling up or scaling out your process there. And if there's not clear differentiation around who owns that particular output, don't make the assumption it's the drug sponsors. There's going to be friction as you move to that supply agreement around that. So understanding what the CDMO can and can't do with that knowledge is really important to get on the table as early as possible, so that as you move to that supply agreement, you start looking at pricing. For example, one of the win-win components we always try and emphasize is how are we going to handle cost-saving improvements to a process? We put inline inspection in place. We innovate the packaging solution so that we have less rejects, drive the cost down. Is that simply cost savings for the drug sponsor, or can the CDMO share in that beyond just the services they're providing? And if you have the ability to architect that, you might make a little less money, but at the end of the day, you really have now a strategic partner that's going to help you make sure your product is successful.
Yeah, that's. I think that the comments about the CPV is very good. In fact, we'll be having a panel session a little later in the series here on continued process verification. Let me so Ed, let me throw this one out to you. I mean, what are the key? So if you're gonna, what are the key things? Based on our conversation going around, sounds to me like there's a lot of loose ends. But I mean, what are the key components you would tell somebody? Okay, you're a drug sponsor. Here are the key components when you walk through. These are the things you have to get on the table with your partner. What would you tell them?
Sure. Well, we've talked about a lot of sort of generic terms but they may be generic, but I think they're really important. We talked about trust. We've talked about flexibility. I think one of the key problems with that sponsors don't realize is that almost every project has never been done before. And then as we talked and said earlier, the technical challenges that are going to write, nobody can predict them ahead of time. So some of the issues that Bikash talked about, where data is going to be available for 8 weeks, and they've got 400 different projects. You should realize that going in, that if you're working with a large company that has 400 projects, you know what, they can't be as flexible as an organization that has 20 or 25 different projects. I have senior management sitting in on our daily meeting where we review every product that's involved in GMP. Okay, that's because every day issues. All of our 7 products that we're manufacturing on a daily basis that are in our GMP suite and plant, there's issues popping up and decisions need to be made. And we want senior management in the room. We can make a decision and move on. But we hold the customer to the same standard, and we make sure that they understand that as well. We're going to be coming to you to make a decision. I've had to pick up the phone more than a few times to call the CEO of the other side. You're putting your manufacturing time at risk. If you don't start by Monday, we're not going to be able to make your product for another 2 months. The next window we have open, your team has got to make a decision, okay, on something. Sometimes it's because they don't have the information. Sometimes they're afraid to make the decision. They don't want to take responsibility. There's a whole plethora of reasons of why things happen the way they do. But trust, flexibility, business acumen along the context of decision making, are things that are really important. And we spend a lot of time talking about it. I'll be honest with you, we spend more time talking with our sponsors about these issues than about chemistry and manufacturing, because that's actually a pretty short conversation. Most of the people that we work with have been referred to us by others, people that we've already worked with, or a member of their board that is the board member of another portfolio company. So, when we get in conversations with people about working together, we know that there's a technical fit. It's how are we going to work together? What are the parameters that we're going to work under, and making sure that they understand, that this is how the engagement's going to proceed, and these are the expectations, from both sides. So trust, flexibility, and efficiency are critical to be successful, I should say, as a CDMO.
That's great. That's something to keep in mind. And we're getting down to the wire here, guys, but there was a piece that Bikash had brought up that's absolutely key. And we've actually spent several sessions at INTERPHEX Live, and that is the IP. So I want to use this to wrap up the session today, but I think, Bikash, why don't we, one of the things is we're sharing, as Ed indicates, we're in this together. We're developing stuff together. So, how do you manage IP when you push the button? What do you think? What's the recos here?
Yeah, it's usually when we get involved in the development agreement. So we work very closely with both sides of the coin. So if we're working with the CDMO, we are going to raise the issue on IP early on. And if we're working with a drug sponsor, we're going to raise the issue of IP early on. We're trying to harness as much innovation and experience as we have in this particular conversation there. And having as best as understood where the hot buttons are as it relates to whatever your technology happens to be in the product development side is really critical to understand if you're a CDMO. And so it's a conversation you're going to want to bring up early on in the development agreement. It's one where you're going to understand how data is going to be managed, what, and if the CDMO can use this information with other clients, potentially competitors, but other clients got similar processes out there. And you need to define how you're going to adjudicate that particular joint effort, because sometimes the drug sponsor is going to bring the scientific insight, which is going to allow the CDMO to apply their experiential insight in order to find a solution there. One couldn't have happened without the other at that point. So there may be a understanding that's architected early on that says, look, if I show you how to do this particular analytical test, and which allows us to perhaps increase the resolution, the LOD and the LOQ drops by an order of magnitude here, which obviously can be cascaded to other products out there. You can say, we're going to allow you to use that for other programs out there because that is going to benefit us, benefit you. But if I'm going to talk about a particular step in my synthesis process, for example, that drives my purity up to 99.8%, you cannot use that information with another process, whether it's competitive or not. Being that specific as it relates to what is important to your IP portfolio as a drug sponsor is the conversation you need to have as soon as possible with the CDMO, so they understand what they're going to get out of it, where they should stray and where they shouldn't stray in terms of assisting in solving the problem.
Ed?
Yeah, I think what we've tried to do over the years is simplify this, because, as you just said, this can be a very complicated, very complex conversation. So how do you simplify it? Well, what we've done is said, well, the people that we work with are spending a lot of money with us. They're relying on us, and to a large extent, we're part of the critical for them. With the active ingredient, obviously, is on a critical path for their success. So with that understanding, our philosophy has been they own everything. Okay, we've been pretty transparent about that. What is harder to quantify is, of course, when you have a chemist who develops some very new chemistry to help develop a molecule for a sponsor. And then 2 years later, there's a similar transformation going on. And then they're going to use that same technique for another molecule. So what we try to build into our agreements is you own everything except expertise, that's specific expertise that we develop internally to help support your program. If we have another project where we can utilize that in the non-competing program, non-competing therapeutic, we could be allowed to practice that if necessary. And I can tell you, with that overall philosophy and the way we've operated, we've never had an issue with anybody. Everyone has seen that to be fair and reasonable. The fact of the matter is once a chemist learns something, I can't extract it from his brain.
Right.
Okay. So trying to paper over that legally, that scenario is just physically impossible. So
yeah.
So by coming up from the get-go and up front and just say, hey, look, you're spending a lot of time with us, you're spending a lot of money with us, you own everything, okay? But we should have the right to practice novel things on non-competing programs, and our community of sponsors has been very, very receptive to that over the years.
Yeah, and I think that gets right back to one of the mantras you keep talking about, Ed, and that is trust. I think a sponsor, no matter whether it's a venture capital guys with three guys with a bag of drug, or it's somebody like a giant global multinational, I think trust between the 2 points working together to get these things out, because you both have a shared partnership, and that's key. And in the end, it has to be an effective patient, and that's really it. It has to be effective for the patient and to get it in there. Right. So having said that, I want to thank you too for the conversation today. I think we've all learned a whole lot, and more importantly, I think what we know now is it's not simply shopping for somebody to help me fix my car. It's this is a major thing I got to put my time in. So with that, I want to say thanks, and that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good speaking to you both. Bye-bye.